Okay, today we're going to start on Pevav Amid Aleph at the Mishnah. Yeah? Ah, okay. Tomorrow, I'm not going to be here. I'm going to a wedding tonight in New Jersey.
Hello, you're teaching tomorrow.
Yeah. So Hillel or Chaim Moshe are probably away also. But, okay.
Yeah, you have to time it better when I'm in town.
I'll tell them.
Okay.
Maybe Dr. Stein. Okay, I will put it on the chat later. See if someone wants to give the share tomorrow. But we're holding on Pei Vav Amid Aleph at the Mishnah. It's towards the bottom of the page. Thank Hashem that they're able to learn Torah every day. It's chos of our learning. We should have the Beis Hamikdash immediately. So good yantif to everyone. For bringing here last night, it was great. The excellent speaker. And okay. The Kulan Shapaku Me'al Gabei Mizbeach La Yachzer. We've been talking about items that weren't supposed to go on the Mizbeach. But they were put on the Mizbeach anyway. And we had a rule, Im Alu La Yerdu. If they go up on the Mizbeach, you don't take them down. Now we're saying if any of these things that did not belong on the Mizbeach, for example, they were puzzle. Or, for example, they didn't belong on the Mizbeach because the bones or the sinews would only go on the Mizbeach if they were attached to the item, but not if they were detached. Whatever the case is, if they fell off, if they jumped off the Mizbeach, they don't get put back on. Yeah, we're quoting from this. Yeah, we quoted this in passing. Where did we quote it? Let's see. Quoted it. No, it doesn't say it. And another halacha similar to this. If there was actually a coal, it could be like from the wood. They would use wood to burn. If a coal jumped off the mizbeach, it would not be put back on the mizbeach. Let's say it's the meat, regular meat of a carbon kosher, not a carbon that didn't belong there. That was the first case. A carbon that did belong there. It was the organs of the carbon that go on the mizbeach, but it jumped off the mizbeach. So if it's before chatzos, then you put it back on the mizbeach. In the law of me'ilah, which you're not allowed to have personal benefit from something that's consecrated, still applies because it's not fully burnt. And it's before chatzos. La'achar chatzos. But if they jumped off the mizbeach after chatzos in layachzer, you don't put it back on the mizbeach. And ve'in ma'ila mem, there's no me'ilah. It's as if the mitzvah's been performed already, and it's what's left is the nothing of that. It's not considered like consecrated carbon that was before. Now we have one extra halacha. I'm sorry. What are you going to do with it? If it wasn't done, I'm not sure. Definitely, you don't put it back up on the altar. Finished. Shem mizbeach mekadosh asarei, just like the altar consecrates things that go on it, right? We said that once it goes up, it doesn't come down. Kacha kevesh kadosh. So too, the ramp. Something goes on the ramp, you don't take it off. The ramp is like the status of the mizbeach. Shem mizbeach kevesh mekadosh asarei kacha kelim. So too, just like the mizbeach and the ramp consecrate items for certain halachas, so too the holy vessels, mikachim, kacha kelim, mikachim, they also consecrate. Okay, let's take a look at each piece of this in the Gemara. First thing we learned was that if it's limbs that jump off, you don't put them back on if they didn't belong there. And Gachelas that jumps off, you don't put it back on. And then we said that the limbs that jump off, depends if it's before chatzos or after chatzos. Gemara says, "Hey chidami, what's the case where you're talking about where you made this distinction between before chatzos and after chatzos?" Edis mamish. Are we talking about as that there still is flesh on these organs that wasn't burnt? If it wasn't consumed by the fire, then afil lachatzes nami. The money you return it even after chatzes. It's supposed to be burnt all night. So why are you saying chatzes? And then there should be the law of meila if there still is flesh on it. Why are you saying there's no meila? Read less b'mamish if you're saying that's entirely burnt. I feel like even before chatzais, you shouldn't have to return it because once it's burnt, then it's burnt. Why would you have to burn? Why were you telling me that there's a law of meila if it's before chatzais? In other words, why is the time the main factor here? It should have to do with is it consumed or is it not consumed? It says no, it's necessary in this middle type of case. Shriri means that the organ or the whatever flesh it is that's in this organ is burnt in a way that it's made hard, but it's not totally burnt. In this case, if it's hardened because of the fire, the fire can make it hard, and then the fire burns it. So it got hard already because of the fire. So here we make a distinction between if it's before chatzos or after chatzos. Let's take a look. Minan Emili. The Gemara is going to elaborate a little bit more on this. What's the source that this should be a distinction between before chatzos and after chatzos? We're going to quote a few psukim here. One pasuk says regarding the carbon ayla, Tavis Arnves Panav Limers Esteris Ayla Hi Ayla Miktam Mizbeach Kalayla the Baker Beishem Mizbeach Tukabay. This is the law of the ayla. It is the ayla that's on the fire the entire night. That's on the Mizbeach the entire night. Is on the fire on the Mizbeach the entire night until the morning. Adds in the way until the morning. So it says, what did it say after that? Al Maitam Mizbeach Kalayla the Baker Beishem Mizbeach Tukabay. And the fire of the Mizbeach consumes it, burns it. So Amar Rav explains it. It says, one pasuk says that it says the entire night, and then it says that it should be consumed, should be burnt. Which means that if it jumps off the altar, you have to put it back on. Another pasuk says, what does that say? It says that the kohen puts on, I guess because it says kol halayla in the pasuk beforehand. So we're saying that now that the kohen is supposed to take the trumas hadeshen, he's supposed to take some of the ashes and take them off the altar. Says the kohen should put on his garments, his linen garments. It doesn't say it doesn't say that he puts it on in the morning, which makes us understand that he's doing this actually in the middle of the night. That you can already start doing the Chumas Hadeshen while it's still night. So what's going on over here? One place it says that you burn it the whole night. The other place says that you start doing the Chumas Hadeshen in the middle of the night. So to answer this contradiction, it says Chalkeyu. We're going to have to divide the night in half. Chetzav Laktara. Half the night is going to be for burning, which means before Chetzais. And Chetzav Harama, and half the night is going to be for removing the ashes. Now, what would be eligible for that? What we're thinking is that even the limbs that were not fully burnt but were just scorched are considered fully consumed once it's after chatzos. We're using these limbs that chatzos should be the deciding factor on them. The ones that were hardened, but they're not fully consumed. If it was fully consumed, then I don't need chatzos to tell me that it's ready for Trumas Hadeshen. I guess that's what sounds like the Gemara is saying. Okay, Masev Rav Kana. Rav Kana is a famous student of Rav. He asks Rav. Remember, he's the one that had to run to Eretz Yisrael. He's the one that was under Rav's bed. He's a student of Rav. Rav Kana asks. We have a Mishnah in Yuma. It says, "B'chol yom Torah Mizbeach." Every day, they would do the Truma Sadesha, and they would take the shovel and they would take the ashes from on the top of the altar, Mekreisa Gever, from the time that the rooster crows. Or around the time, either a little before or a little after. However, B'Yom Kippurim, and Yom Kippur, B'Chatzais, they did it so early, they did it from midnight. Rooster crows after midnight, sometime in between midnight and dawn. And it has 2 stars. You need the 3 stars. That's a 2-star general. You need a 3-star general. So, and Yom Kippur, they would go back to Chatzais B'Regalim, would be on the 3 holidays. There's so many people there. There's so much to do. So many sacrifices. Bashmer Sarishayna. They could go back to the first watch. First watch meant that if the night was divided into 3 parts, so then they would go back to 1/3 of the night. And Chatzais is in the middle of the second watch, right? This is first watch. Remember this? This Chatzais, that's divided in 2. Then the first page of brachas, first few pages of brachas, Sech the brachas, coming up in a year and a half, discuss that there may be 3 watches or 4 watches during the night, when the time that the angels sing at night. So those are called watches. It's either 3 or 4. What's that?
Go home last night.
Huh.
I would nap. Like old days, like college days.
Someone told me this guy would fall asleep every time the rabbi would start speaking, like 5 minutes in. He would like fall asleep. One time, the rabbi comes in, he's sleeping already. Says, Yankel, says, I didn't even start talking, and you're already asleep. He says, Rabbi, I trust you. Anyway, okay, so B'Regalim, you go back to the first watch. Now, if the question here on Rav Khan is asking that if Rav is quoting a pasuk that tells me that Chatzais is the demarcation line of if it's going to go back on or not going to go back, is it considered digested by the altar? Right? Is it considered digested? Is it consumed by the altar? That's chatzais. It's a 1 second. I have a Mishnah that says that chatzais doesn't determine that. I have other times of the year when I don't use chatzais. So how could you quote me a pasuk, and then there's other times that you don't follow? If it's a deraisa, then how could it switch depending on the season? How could on the holidays? How could you say that you're ready to take off the ashes even before Chatzos? Yeah, it's in Ve'echem Achrinan. I don't know. Yeah, I'm not sure if that's supposed to be part of this. Rashi doesn't have the words Ve'echem Achrinan. Tosfos explains Ve'echem Achrinan means that if Chatzos is deraisa, then how could sometimes you don't do it from Chatzos? If it's a deraisa, then you should always do it at the earliest time. That's how Tosfos explains that. Okay, Amar Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Yochanan explains in the festival they had extra ashes, but they also had extra sacrifices that they would need to start everything early. So Rabbi Yochanan explains that it says in the pasuk Kol Laila the Biker, it says 1 second. It's on the night. It's on the altar the whole night till the morning. That's what we say about the burning of the limbs. Since it says that it's on the fire the whole night, then I know the whole night is until the morning. Why does it say the whole night until the morning? Every night goes until the morning. Why does it have to say the whole night till the morning? It says 10 baiker lebikr shalayla. You have to give another morning to the morning of the night. Now this is an interesting expression. The morning of the night is just the morning, the dawn. That's considered the morning. It's like the night owns its own morning. What's the morning of the night? The dawn. That's the regular morning of every night. But you have to give it another morning. What's the other morning? Hilka explains like this: every time you do it from the on a regular day, you do it from the rooster crows, which is earlier than dawn. Yom Kippurim, Mishum Chos the Kohen Gadol, and Yom Kippur, because the Kohen Gadol has so much work to do that day, then you do it from Chatzais. Should be able to do his work slowly, shouldn't have to rush, so they get started early. Regalim the Nafishi Karbanim. On the holidays where there's so many karbanas, so much ashes, the Kadmavasi Yisrael Mashmur Rishayna. Already from the first watch, people are already coming into the base of Migdash, they're ready to get their places, to bring their sacrifices. The B'chtani Seifa, as it says, that already by the dawn, the courtyard was already filled with people. So what we're learning here is that you're able to add an extra morning to the typical morning. What does that mean? You started earlier. We're learning from a pasuk that you're allowed to start it earlier. I think whatever the case is, still holding with the teretz that the Gemara gave, that there's a difference between before chatzais and after chatzais regarding the limbs that just became hard because of the fire, if they're considered consumed or not. The Itmar, the statement that was made by Amirayim, says like this: Pirshu, if the limbs that became hardened, but they weren't entirely burnt, they came off the altar. Pirshu means they were separated or removed from the altar. Kaidam chatzais. What's the rule if it's before chatzais? Then you're supposed to put them back on. Ve'chziran acher chatzais. But you put them back on not before chatzais. You put them back on after chatzais. So that's interesting because at the moment of chatzais, if they were on the altar, they're already hardened, but they're not fully burnt. They're already hardened by the fire. If they were on the altar at chatzais, that moment, as this bell struck 12, at that moment, so they would be considered consumed because they're partially consumed. The combination between their level of being burnt and the time would say, oh, they're done. There's no more me'ilah. They're consumed. However, they weren't on the altar at that moment because they had fallen off before. If they've fallen off, you have to put them back on. If they would fall off after, you would not put them back on. But the problem is that they weren't on the altar at the moment of chatzos. So what happens now? The altar at chatzos would have considered them consumed, but they were off the altar. So it's a machlekes between Rabba and Rav Chisda. Rabba says, chatzos sheni eichaltan. You have to put them back on the altar. And you have to wait for the following night. Following night, if they're burnt, then that's going to be they have to be finished burning the following night. Like a reset. You have to put it back on. And the laws of Me'ilah will still apply. Yeah, Rab is quite strict about the considering of these limbs, of these organs, to be consumed by the altar. We only say that if it's actually on the altar. And you see, the problem is the limbs aren't fully consumed; they're just hardened. So the fire affected them, but they're not fully burnt. If they're fully burnt, then there's no question. The laws of Me'ilah are off. You don't have to put it back on, right? It's fully burnt. The problem is here, it's burnt a little bit to get hard, but it's not fully burnt. So Rabbah says that only if it's on the altar at the moment of chatzos. But here it wasn't on the altar at the moment of chatzos. Therefore, you have to put it back on. So when is this going to be considered consumed? Only the following night. It has to be on there by chatzos. Problem is, by the morning, it's already considered lina. No, it would be lina if it's off the mizbeach. We'll see further about lina. Okay, that's the opinion of Rabbah. Rav Chisda Amar, sorry. I'm not sure what they would do with it. If you would eat it, it would be meila. Right? It would be a violation. I don't know. Rav Chisda says, Amud Shachar Echaltan. You don't have to wait for the following night. We have another rule that when it becomes dawn, it changes its status. At dawn, it's already considered lina. It was left overnight. Once it's left overnight, so then it changes its status, and that's considered like it's already considered consumed. Amri Beirav. So the problem here is no problem. It's Machlekes Rabbah and Rav Chisda if it's considered consumed if it's off the altar at midnight. So the yeshiva of Rav explains my time of the Rav Chisda. What's the explanation for Rav Chisda? Rav Chisda is the husband of Rav's granddaughter. Rav's daughter married Rav Chanan bar Rabba. Chanan bar Rabba's daughter married Rav Chisda. Rav Chisda's daughter married Rukva and Rami bar Chama and also and Rava. Yeah. I don't know who Rava's daughter married, but we take this through all the way down to the last generation, probably. Anyway, the Bei Rav, the yeshiva of Rav, they explain Rav Chisda. Rav Chisda said that the dawn is enough to consider these limbs that were partially consumed to be considered fully consumed. They explain like this: whereas for chatzos, which doesn't make it into lina, lina means that it was left on the altar. It doesn't make it lina. Lina would be something that was left on the altar, that was left off the altar till morning. When morning comes, it's considered totally invalid if it was off the altar. But lina means to lan, means to rest overnight. So chatzos doesn't do that. Chatzos, if it's off the altar, it's still fine. You can put it back on. It doesn't become puzzle. So chatzos doesn't do that. But nevertheless, chatzos considers this type of burnt organ, partially burnt organ, hardened, to be considered consumed, right? Chatzos doesn't make it lina, but makes it consumed. So even though it doesn't do this, but it does that. When it comes to dawn, that makes it considered lina, that it prohibits the limbs from being going back on the altar, they become puzzle. In a din sheisikol, for sure, it should consider it to be consider it to be consumed. That's the explanation for Rav Chisda. Why should the dawn do anything here? Says, well, you see, the dawn accomplishes things that even chatzos doesn't accomplish. Okay. Now we have another machlekes between Rav and Rav Chisda. Pirshu pedim chatzos. The last Gemara, we had a machlekes because they were on the altar before chatzos, then they fell off, and you put them back at 12 o'clock. They were off the altar, and you put them back at 12:01 after chatzos. Question is, when is it going to be considered consumed? Rabbah said the following night. Rav Chisda said by dawn. Now it's falling off the altar, and you're not putting it back before chatzos. You're not putting it back after chatzos. You're putting it back in the morning. After Madashacha. Rabba Amar Chatzos Sheni Echal. Rabba says, well, so what? You wait for the second night. like just like the last one. You put it back before it fell up before chatzos, put it back after chatzos. It doesn't become consumed till this following night. So here also, put it back after chatzos. It's not only after chatzos, but it's after dawn. So you wait for the following night for it to be consumed. Rav Chisda Amar ein ben mikol olam. He said that when would it be considered consumed by the dawn? But now that you missed the dawn, you missed the night, you missed chatzos, you missed the dawn, it's never considered consumed, and it's going to be me'ila on this forever. It's going to be, if anyone ever has personal use of it, it's going to be considered the mitzvah wasn't performed with it. It wasn't burned on the altar. Me'ila goes away after the mitzvah is performed. The Gemara asks, Rabbah and Rav Chisda say, it goes like this. According to both of them, it needs to be on the altar for chatzos to work. Chatzos has a certain effect. Midnight has a certain, chatzos means midnight, right? Has a certain effect on the organs. Maskefla Rav Yosef. Rav Yosef has a question to them. To Rab and Rav Chisda. Man leimalan, the chatzos, Bereshim Mizbeach mashal equal. Where do you get this from? That chatzos on the top, when it's on top of the altar, considers it consumed. We're talking about the limbs that were partially consumed, but together with chatzos, we consider it like the mitzvah has been performed. Where do you get that from? Rav Yosef is a friend of Rabbah. Where it was a whole discussion who should be the Rosh Hashiva first. Remember, Rabbah became the Rosh Hashiva first, 22 years, and then afterwards Rav Yosef. Rav Yosef is a contemporary of Rabbah, Rav Chisda. Says, where do you get this from? Dilma kol heicha demashkale mashvali yikol. Maybe, even if it's not on the altar, considered consumed wherever it is, once chatzos comes. Even if it fell off, because it was partially burned. And chatzos comes, so good, it's done. Sholcha misam, he sent the psak halacha from Eretz Yisrael, hilchasa karav Yosef, that even if it's not on the altar, it's considered consumed. Once chatzos arrives. What's irrelevant if it's considered consumed, if there's no more meila? And if the mitzvah's been done. Itmar nami, we also have a statement. Amar of Chia Barabba. Chia Barabba says, that's a student of Rabbi Yochanan, Pirshu kaidam chatzos v'chzir nachar chatzos. If they fell off the altar before chatzos, they were put back on after chatzos, loy nanen. That means that rabbinically it shouldn't have any personal use of it. But there's no more meila. Why there's no more meila? Because chatzos considered it consumed. It's considered the mitzvahs performed. V'chein tani bar kapara. Bar kapara also teaches, like Rav Yosef, it says, Pirshu kaidam chatzos v'chzir nachar chatzos yetzim midei meila. It goes out of the status of meila. It's not this. The laws of having personal use, things that were consecrated, don't apply to this because the mitzvah's already been performed. Amalei Rav Papa la Abaya. Rav Papa says to Abaya, Chim Yachad the Sholchem Yisamel Chesed Rav Yosef. Amar Rav Chia Barabba v'chein Tani Bar Kapara. If I have the psak halacha from Eretz Yisrael, if I have Rav Chia Barabba saying that chatzos takes effect, if I have Bar Kapara saying that chatzos takes effect even without being on the altar because it's been partially consumed, Rabba Rav Chisda my pliki. So what's the machlekes Rabba and Rav Chisda? I don't want to say that Rabba's opinion or Rav Chisda's opinion is totally disregarded. What are they arguing about if that's not no one holds like that? Amalei. So Abaya responds. Rav Papa is a student of Abaya. So Rav Papa is asking Abaya this question. He responds, Bishmeinim. That was talking about the machlekes Rabba and Rav Chisda. I'm not talking about limbs that were fully consumed, that the flesh was hardened by the fire. It's talking about fatty meat. Now, in this fatty meat, shmeinim, it's fatty meat. So it's these limbs that were hardened by fire. The chatzos doesn't consider them consumed. What's the difference? They're not considered ash so easily. If it's regular organs that's not fatty, then it's considered ash by just getting hard. If once chatzos comes, but if it's fatty, then it's not considered ash. Let me see if there's a comment on this. Why? Because of the texture.
It's jello.
Um, yeah, I don't know what the explanation is, but apparently it's less considered ash. Once it's ash, then it's ready for the Trumas Hadeshin. But if it's not ash, then it's not ready for the Trumas Hadeshin. So there's a difference now between if it's regular organs or if it's fatty pieces. Okay, boy mine Rava me Rabba. Now this is a big chiddush to have Rava asking Rabba a question. I think there may be one other place in Shas where you have this. Actually, the author Aaron Hyman was a big expert. Anoim and Amiraim he wrote books like an encyclopedia on this. He thinks that Rava and Rabba never had any discussions. I don't know what he's going to do with this Gemara. He said Rava learned by Rabba when he was a kid, but after that in the Gemara we don't have any conversations. We have machlekes in, but they never conversed, except for here. Boimine Rava mi Rabba. Rava asked Rabba a question. Lina mayelas b'reisha shamazbeach. Let's say there's a liam that's on top of the altar, but it wasn't burnt. They put it up on the altar. They didn't make it to the fire. So do we say that it becomes puzzle? Puzzle belina. Lina is something that was left overnight, not on the altar. Or maybe it doesn't, or maybe lina doesn't take effect because it's on the altar, so it doesn't become invalid. What's the case where Rav is asking this question? Do you want to say that it was actually on the altar the whole night? 1 second. What do you do with something that was left overnight? You have to burn it, right? It was on the karka, it was on the ground. What do you do with it? You burn it. Amrit, the layerdu, that if it's put on the altar, you don't take it off. Oh, not that you, if it's lano, yeah. We had the first case of olu im olu layerdu, first case of something that if it went up on the altar, you don't remove it. First case was something, the organs that were left overnight. You don't put it on the altar, but if you did put it on the altar, you don't remove it. Just 1 second. So if something that wasn't on the altar all night, but gets put on the altar in the morning, you don't remove it. So what are you asking? If you should remove it off the altar, if it was left on the altar? Even if it was off the altar, but it was put on, you don't remove it. Now that it's on the altar, of course you're not going to remove it. Ella the yard that we're talking about, rather where it came off the altar in the morning. We say that it became puzzle. Do we say that it's not puzzle because it was on the altar? It was in a safe zone, right? It's in home base. Do we say l'shulchan medaminla? Do we compare it to the table? Now, what happens by the table? The showbread was on the table for a week. If it's left there for longer, it doesn't become puzzle. The Tanan, afilu hein ala shulchan yom rabim ein bekach klum. Even if it's left there longer than a week, it doesn't become puzzle. So, do we compare the mizbeach to the shulchan? That if it's there longer than it's supposed to, it doesn't become invalid. Do we compare the top of the mizbeach to being on the floor, and the limbs that are on the floor would become invalid, and you won't put it on the altar. So Amalei, so Rabba responds to Rava, Ein lina b'reisha shel mizbeach. They don't become invalid if they're on the altar, and even if they were taken off, you still put them back on. They do have the time limit had to do with eating. Time limit had to do with sprinkling the blood. Sprinkling the blood has to be before nightfall. The eating of it had to be sometime before it was offered, from when it was offered until the following morning, depending on which sacrifice. And then you have things that are supposed to go on the altar. Now, the things that go on the altar, they were supposed to get them burnt sometime during the night. Now we're talking about where it didn't get burned during the night. So what happens now? We say that it becomes something that needs to be removed off the altar, or maybe it's left on the altar. Let's say it's left on the altar, but if it gets removed, it doesn't get put back on. Now Rabbi is telling us that if it was on the altar the whole night until dawn, and then it was taken off the altar, you still put it back on because it didn't become invalid. It didn't even have the status of if it comes off, don't put it back on. It's perfectly fine. But Kibla Minei, I lie. The Gemara asks, did Rabbi accept the opinion of Rabbi after he told him the answer? Tashima, so come and listen. Ditmar, it's funny that the Gemara should ask this. Rabbi is a student of Rabbi. Ivarim Shalom Ba'azara. What happens if there were limbs that were left overnight on the floor of the Azara, of the courtyard? So throughout the night, you're able to bring them up on the altar and to burn them. Lon Bereisha Shel Mizbeach, if they stood out the entire night on the top of the altar, you can always burn it. Yardu, if they came off the altar, so Rabba Maryalu, Rabba says that you put it up. Rabba Malayalu, Rabba says you don't put it back up. Obviously, he didn't accept Rabba's teaching. Rabba would say that you put it back up. Rabba said that you don't put it back up. Shema Mina. Okay. Oh, we have a new Gemara. It says, Shem Shemazbeach Mekadesh. Just like the altar consecrates the items that are placed on the altar, so too the ramp consecrates the items that are placed on the ramp. Then we said, so too a vessel, a holy vessel, the service vessels also consecrate the items that are placed in it. Taner Rabbanu was taught in a brayso, Anegea b'mizbeach, anything that touches the altar, it says yikdash, becomes holy. So, ainly ella nizbeach. I would only know that anything that touches the altar becomes holy. Kevesh minayin. How do you know anything that touches the ramp also becomes holy? Talmud Laimar es hamizbeach. It says you should anoint the altar, and when it says es, I guess the S is coming to include also the ramp. Word S sometimes includes something that's secondary, right? Okay. Klisharis minayin. How do you know that vessels as well consecrate what touches it? Anything that touches them should be holy, and the them over here would be referring to even the vessels. Rish Lakish has a question of Rabbi Yochanan. Klisharis, when he's talking about the vessels, if there was a sacrifice that was invalid and it was placed into the vessel, say a carbon mincha. Let's say there was a carbon mincha, a meal offering that was invalid and was placed inside the vessel anyway. Right? They took the flour and the oil that maybe became tummy or something, it was invalid, and they put it inside the vessel. Question is, if it was before it was placed in the vessel, then it became tummy, then you would redeem it. It wasn't put in the vessel yet. You would be able to redeem it. You consecrated it, but you would be able to redeem it because it was invalid. It would be an animal, you can't redeem it. You would have to get a mum to redeem it. If it would be just flour and oil that became tamei, I think you would be able to redeem it. The question is, or at least that's the assumption here, that you should be able to redeem it. But let's say it was placed into a vessel. Should the vessel consecrate it, then now it's not eligible to be redeemed? Or does the vessel consecrate things that are invalid? Amalei, so Rabbi Yochanan responds to him, Tanisua, we learned this in the Mishnah. You can't redeem it. It says, Kshem Shem Mizbeach V'Akevesh Mekatsh Yisraelim, Kach Kelim Mekatshim. The Kelim consecrate things that are placed in it. So therefore there's going to be no redemption. Yeah, that's what Rabbi Yechon's responding. Yeah, there's a Mishnah in Menachos that says that if it became tamei before it was put into a vessel, you could redeem it, because at that point it's only considered that the value of it is consecrated, but not the it doesn't have an intrinsic holiness. Do it over, basically. Amar lei, yeah.
Is a completion.
Right, exactly. Amar lei. So Rish Lakish asks Rabbi Yochanan. He says back to Rabbi Yochanan. He says, "Lechatchila likarev kami bayili." My question wasn't about redemption. My question was, if it's put into the vessel, can it be now brought up on the altar? Rabbi Yochanan responds, "Hanami tanina. What are you talking? That's also a Mishnah." It says, "Kiblu psulim." If people that were not eligible to offer the sacrifice received the blood, v'zarku es damer. And then they sprinkled the blood. It says, and the sacrifice was put up on the altar. It says you don't take it off. That was one of the cases of if it's put on the altar, you don't remove it.
There wasn't a person. It was.
But it's enough, so therefore it's invalid. Nevertheless, it gets put on the altar. If it goes on the altar, it doesn't get removed. That was like a regular rule of things that go on the altar. Yeah, it's invalid. Okay, so my lav, Rabbi Yochanan explains, is it not talking about shekiblu psulim v'zarku psulim? Talking about that the blood was sprinkled by people that weren't eligible, and nevertheless, if it's on the altar, you don't take it down. But lechatchila, you wouldn't put it up. So, which means that if the kayanim that were not eligible received the blood, yeah, and regular kayanim regular kayanim sprinkled the blood, then maybe lechatchila could bring it up. What's the problem over here? Why it's not eligible? Because there was a double problem. The psulim received the blood, and the psulim sprinkled the blood. So the question is over here if there's a comma in between these two cases. The kiblu psulim v'zarku psulim. The blood was received by psulim and they sprinkled it. But let's say the case would be different. Let's say the blood was received by psulim. They had to get into the vessel by someone that wasn't eligible, but who sprinkled it would be someone else. Then maybe we would say that's acceptable, because once it's in a holy vessel, it's fine. Right, exactly. Since the sprinkling was done by someone that was eligible, then maybe that's fine. So Rish Lakish tells back to Rabbi Yochanan, that's not the pshat in the Mishnah. He says the Mishnah was talking about two separate cases, independent cases. Like kiblu psulim, inami zarku psulim. Those were two possibilities. Either it was received by psulim, or it was sprinkled by psulim. Therefore, from that Mishnah, you don't have any proof that it should be allowed to be offered just because it was placed in a vessel. I guess the Gemara's question was, Rish Lakish's question was, that just like the Mizbeach, once it's put on it, it's not taken off. So too, if it's put in a holy vessel, it should be already at the status where it could be put on the altar. As we already know that Rish Lakish adjusts the question. We're not talking about if it's allowed to be redeemed.
was it like an uneligible person sprinkled, and an uneligible person could do it?
Take the blood. No, could go back and get the blood again. The remaining blood. Here we're talking about where the only blood that you have is the blood from the uneligible. We're saying that if someone else comes, could someone else come, a regular kohen, and sprinkle the blood? That's what you say. Well, it's already in a holy vessel. It's like as if it's on the altar. So you can finish it up. So, but you don't have any proof from our Mishnah. Okay, I think I want to leave by stop at Avir Psulim because the Gemara is just going to go on about this. We're 3 lines from the top on Pei Zayin and Beis. I need a volunteer for tomorrow.
Oh, the Dr. Stein just volunteer.
Dr. Stein said that. Oh, okay. Hello, you. I'll try to post. Okay, have a good day, everyone.
Okay, thank you so much. Have a wonderful day.
Okay. Yes,
Okay.